Hi, I'm Jeanette. Welcome to Bloom Into Your Soul. Here we learn and share all things that will guide us back home into our body and begin to hear our inner voice in order to create a life that feels so good and allows room for all of our healing on a mind, body, and soul level. Are you ready? Let's dive in. Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode. In this episode, I interview Michelle Diasinos, and she's been here before. We talked about conscious parenting, and this time she and I will be talking about breath work. And Michelle is a mother of two. She's a breathwork facilitator and author with a background in occupational therapy and education. Michelle's personal journey with her mental health and emotional wellness led her on the path of healing and self discovery. Her journey inward sparked a deep calling to support others seeking peace, breaking generational cycles, and navigating their unique healing journey. I'm so excited for you to hear this episode and to know what gems come and serve you from our conversation. Let's dive in. Hi, Michelle. How are you? Thank you for coming on to Bloom Into Your Soul again for the second time. And this time we're going to be talking about breath work. Would you care to let us know what that is?
Yes, absolutely. So we breathe all day. So what is breath work exactly? So there are many different types of breath work practice that exist. It is a practice that's been around for a really long time. And within the different practices, there are different types of breath patterns that can yield different results as well. So for instance, we may be using a certain type of breath pattern to access states of calmness, or we may be choosing different breath patterns to bring ourselves to alertness and alert our bodies in a natural way. So common to all of these is the notion that altering our breath allows us to consciously alter our state. And so, whether it's a physical or mental or emotional state really depends on the type of breath work that you're choosing. So, overall, I would define breath work as breathing with intention and breathing with awareness. And you may be incorporating certain rhythms and patterns. And we do this to access wellness and deep healing. And so, breath work is one healing modality. And it's one type of embodied practice that allows us to really disconnect from our busy mind and reestablish our connection with our body.
So would you say that it helps us with like anxiety and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. It can help us in many different ways. So, um, with anxiety and with mental health and emotional wellness, absolutely. One of the amazing things about the breath is that we carry it with us all the time, wherever we go. And so it's an amazing tool that we can just pick up and use when we need it. And in fact, when one of my earliest introductions to breath work was because of my own experience with anxiety attacks, and being able to use the breath to modulate my body and my nervous system and help bring on states of calmness and regulation.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned your own experience of panic attacks. It's funny because when I started getting connected to the breath, I didn't consider it breath work. I was just like, okay, pause and just breathe for a few minutes, just so you can like calm yourself down. And I'm just curious about more of your story around like what introduced you to what breath work, and yeah, so just a little more in depth of like how it's helped you.
Awesome. Yes, I'd love
Especially
to
in,
share that.
I'm sorry, especially like as this year unfolds, how has it helped you in juggling motherhood as this year
Yes.
unfolds, you know? So I'd
Yes.
love to hear some of that.
It's been an intense year. It's been an intense couple of years. I'll go back to the beginning, which is in a personal capacity. It was around 2013 when I began experiencing anxiety attacks. And the first time this happened, I was actually driving. I was studying then. I was studying my master's, and I was driving home from work and from university, and I felt I had this severe pain in my right shoulder, and I had no awareness of what was going on. I really thought that I was having a health event, something related to my heart. And so I pulled over. And in the months that followed, I began realizing that I had symptoms of generalized anxiety disorder. And I think it was the lack of awareness that at the beginning that caused me to really just have no idea what was going on in my body, not even able to recognize what was going on in my body or identify the patterns within my body, which kind of took, which is why it took that time for the diagnosis to come forth. And similar to your experience, breathwork wasn't taught to me as this is breathwork. It's part of your treatment plan. It was really trusting and going back in my gut to knowing, okay, my body is starting to feel, I'm starting to get symptoms of feeling lightheaded and my heart's beating faster. And so kind of discovered through my own research that I could use the breath in a way to help me calm myself down, help me bring myself back to the moment and really ground myself. And one of the symptoms that I often felt was just this feeling that I couldn't breathe, like my breath was stuck in my chest. And that's probably where that research began. And so that really helped me through that period of my life. And since then, I actually haven't experienced panic attacks because of being able to use my breath in a certain way, together with other parts of the treatment plan as well. But I also began working with breathwork on a professional front as a healing modality when I was working in occupational therapy. So that was really focused around respiration activities for managing nervous systems and for creating sensory diets for children with sensory needs as well. And then that was the capacity of which I was working with breathwork. And then it really ramped back up again. And I was reintroduced to breathwork in a new way around the end of 2019, the beginning of 2020. There was a lot of major changes happening in life. I had two really small children. I had recently launched a new coaching business. At the same time, my husband was launching a crypto business, and we just uprooted our home and sold our stuff. We were actually planning on traveling overseas when we started hearing news of the pandemic overseas, which then changed our plans, and we ended up staying long-term with my in-laws. And so there was just a lot of things happening in life, and I was starting to see signs of my mental health being impacted again. Really seeing the dysregulation in my nervous system. I was seeing that I was trauma responses, and the stress was just really building for me. And so I searched around, and I came across breathwork with Revelation Breathwork, and that my first class was it just blew me away. We was chatting earlier, and you mentioned how these new insights coming forth, and just a flow and an ease, which was just seemed so difficult to access before. And I was seeing an immediate relief of the symptoms of my stress and my anxiety. But outside of that, I was seeing some really beautiful things happening. It was really improving my mental clarity. I would go to class with a question on my mind, and at the end of the session realize, like, oh, wow, I didn't, that the answers for that just came forth so easily. And I was just finding myself able to become a lot more focused and get to a space of groundedness and calmness a lot faster. And so it's gone from, my experience with breathwork is, on a personal front, has gone from using it as a reactive measure to help me deal with things as they are coming up. And it's now more of a preventative tool. It's more of a self-care practice. And one of the things that it's really helped me with in motherhood has been allowing me to self-regulate so that my children can co-regulate with me. That's just been the biggest benefit of breath work on a personal front. And it's been wonderful to see the kids want to take part in it and practice it as well. And there's lots of fun play activities that we can do together on the go. It's nothing, it requires no work to prepare anything. It really allows us to be creative and find ways to incorporate it into our day. So I've really witnessed it as a tool for others who are seeking wellness and really want to live in integrity with their intentions. And so now I'm just sharing what I know and love with others so they can benefit from it too.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned the kids. They've seen me do it too, and they walk around, breathe in, and they put their hands together. You guys can't see me, but they put their hands together and they just take in a deep breath and they let it out. And it's just the cutest thing. So like, I have a big smile right now because I can picture your children doing that. And then the ability, like the tools that they're gaining from watching us do something that takes care of ourselves. And like you said, it's so easy to access and be creative. Just yesterday, I was noticing they were very dysregulated, all three of them. And I took them outside. I sat with them and I told them, okay, take a deep breath. And when you breathe out, you make an animal sound. What animal are you going to choose?
Love that.
And my eldest had a little bit of resistance towards it, but it's just interesting how it works for them too. Like, and seeing the amazing like effects happening on tiny little humans. It just makes you like more, like you said, using it less as a reactive and more as a proactive modality. And I'm interested in seeing, in knowing, like, what have you seen? Have you mentioned the focus and the ease and the mental clarity with the people you're practicing with? Have they mentioned some of those things happening for them as well?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things about breathwork that's really interesting is that even when we're using the same breath pattern or similar breath patterns each time you practice, so they say that may be on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, even though the breath is the same, the breath pattern may be the same each time, the results that we get can be so different. Mm-hmm. And I really think that is a testament to the healing process and really just allowing ourselves to surrender to the process rather than trying to control the process, letting whatever healing is supposed to happen for you. And so those who I have worked with have reported all sorts of interesting results for themselves. So many have mentioned what we would expect to hear around the relaxation and the calmness, releasing of heavy emotions, releasing of stagnant emotions. Some people have also shared that they feel a relief of chronic pain. So that's been really beautiful in terms of how breathwork can impact us physically and physiologically. I've also heard accounts of improved sleep.
Yeah.
It's also been helpful for support in recovery from addiction as well. And for quite some time, I was really working with breathwork for my spiritual practice and my spiritual growth as well. And there's a lot of anecdotal feedback that suggests it can help us really create that space for us to receive intuitive insights, to I guess connect with something larger than ourselves. And so that's been a really beautiful part of the experience as well. And yeah, so I would say that's those are what are most often reported when practicing with others.
And I'm interested in like going further on the emotional release that people are feeling. And I'm pretty sure you and I have, I have felt it. You mentioned that tightness in your stomach when you felt like you couldn't breathe. And of course, when we struggle with generalized anxiety, we tend to have that right there in our stomach. And I felt it too. And since I've been practicing, I've noticed an ease in my breath. I don't feel that constriction of the breath. And so I'm curious if you can, like, how am I trying to say this? Emphasize more on how the emotions get trapped in our body, and if you can tell us, like, if you can, where they can potentially be stored. Am I making sense? My question is, I feel like I dragged that question on forever.
No, that was perfect for collecting all the information we needed. So I guess it depends on which aspect you would take on that. The first that came to mind was really around the chakras and energy centers of our body. Often we would be feeling that around the throat and around down into the heart space, down into the sacral areas. And the breathwork training that I've received has been both more on the energy body side, as well as on the scientific physiological effects and how that impacts our mental and emotional health as well. But with breathing, we're really there are other practices involved with the breathing, coming into that space, really creating safety for ourselves in that space, clearing the energetic space around us that allows for the energy to flow through our body, flow through our different chakra points as well. And so that is kind of one aspect of looking at it from an energetic standpoint. And if in that standpoint, we'd be looking at emotions as trapped energy or really dense energy. And so bringing the breath through can, I guess, flush us out from that perspective. But from a scientific perspective, which can correlate in some ways, which is what I find most fascinating about this modality and about this practice, is that breathwork can really help us with our vagal tone and looking at our body in terms of polyvagal theory and how we can, what happens when we are under stress and what happens to our bodies when we're under stress, when we are really getting into those fight or flight modes. Breath can really help us regulate our nervous systems and bring us back down into an optimal space for breath as well. So Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. You know what just came up, like a picture of when like an animal is under stress and like they shake their body, but then they also let out this weird breath. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen like horses or something when they're in distress and then they just like breathe out, like almost like
Yeah.
they know to like release whatever was happening to them at that moment. They just have to let that sight of relief like go. And it's so crazy how that can be like effective for us as well.
Yeah. And when we think about it, every expression that we have is on an exhale, whether that is us crying or screaming or laughing or, having a pleasurable moment or any of those things. It's always on an exhale. And that's really helping us flush out our system.
Oh, that's interesting that you mentioned that. I didn't think about it that way. Every experience is happening on an exhale. And like even when we're in joy, like laughing, like when you said laughing and when we're amazed, and wow, that is something to like pause on. I like that. I don't know why I'm nerding out about that so much. I
It's
think,
okay. I did too when I first heard it.
yeah, like I just want to note that I don't think that having the year that we've experienced, the past year, that 2 years that we've experienced, we would be able to access, like, at least speaking from my perspective, be able to access like such um a place where we can laugh and have like this conversation together. um at least for me in my experience, if I wasn't practicing breath work right now, because I found that throughout this past year and some change, um there a lot of stuff surfaced for me, um with past anxiety and a lot of family issues as well. And so um I was doing the meditations. I was doing so much like that I've already known to do, the journaling, therapy, and all of that helps, right? But then something hit different when I started accessing breath work in a deeper way. And so this is why I'm like geeking out about breath work, and I was like, let's talk about it. I'm wondering, you said it's really and I have seen it too, like it's very trendy, but I'm wondering how the rest of, I'm trying to say this the most mindful way I can think of, how everyone, if everyone had access to this, how they would be coping through this past year. Like, I just, and this is another reason why I wanted to do this podcast episode and have this chat, because the more people can learn about this and access this, like how many people can it help, right? Like cope through
Yeah.
everything that's been going on. Um, there was a question that I had, and
I'll just respond to some of your points there. I think a lot of the work that we have been introduced to in the last few decades have really been around mindfulness and the mindset, how we respond to our thoughts, which is a really, really important piece of the puzzle. And like you, also accessing similar modalities, I found that there was still something missing. There was a piece missing. And I think the way that breath work is a gateway into a deeper healing, I guess we would say, is because it is an embodied practice. It really invites us to drop further into our bodies and access the intelligence of our bodies. We do live in a modern society that is very based on using our minds, based on intellectualizing things, intellectualizing arguments. And we're living in a time where our bodies are actually responding in a way that we may not understand. You know, in our minds, we may be trying to logic our way through things and logic our way through finding answers. Where was I? Speaking about logicking, using logic to find our way through the current problems that we face in our modern society. And breathwork is an ancient practice. It's really inviting us actually to go back to our roots and use the intelligence of our body to help us work through some of our trauma and our stress.
Things that we've accumulated so much over the past couple of years. And I can see where mindfulness can become very logical and almost make it hard, especially when our nervous system is facing such different things that it's never experienced before. I can see how it can become almost like a monkey mind, a place where like we just it's really hard to come into the present moment and arrive in our body. Whereas, like you said, breath work, you really just it allows you to sink in, like right there. You are right here in this moment, and this is all that matters right now. And it's so beautiful if we allow it. If we allow it. Is there any like things that might make it hard for you to do breath work? Like any certain folks that shouldn't be doing breath work? Anything that might come up for certain people during breath work?
I'm really glad that you asked that. And I think it depends on the type of breath work that you're practicing. There are a lot of the breathwork patterns that we would use to access calm states or focus states. Usually, I would say generally, they would be safer options. Of course, if you're listening to this and you haven't practiced breathwork before and you're new to it, it's always useful to have a chat with your medical professional before proceeding. But with the calmer patterns, I would say generally they're pretty safe to do. There are other types of patterns that are super ventilative. So we're bringing a lot of oxygen into our body, and that may not be as safe. Or I should say that doesn't have the evidence to support that it is safe to do if you have certain conditions. And so I can share with you, I do have some contraindications that I share with others that they should definitely check with their health professional before practicing the more superventilative patterns. So pregnancy would definitely be one where you would be really careful, only because we just don't know how changing our oxygen levels and our pH levels can affect our babies. If you have cardiovascular disease, that would be important to check as well. If you have high blood pressure, if you've had any recent injuries or surgery, and a history of severe mental illness as well. So a history of psychosis, seizure disorders, and also a family history of aneurysms, I would say, other really important ones. Also anything affecting the eye, so retinal detachment or glaucoma, those kind of conditions as well. So I think as a precaution, always just to discuss it and to use your discernment and research what may be safe or unsafe. So important to look at our body, as always, as a whole, our physical and our mental and our emotional as well. Yeah.
I find our body has a way to tell us like, this is not working for us. Like, let's just stop right here if we listen to it.
Yeah. I think the other thing I wanted to mention with the super ventilative practices too, is many of us in the modern world, we walk around actually not breathing properly, not breathing in the way that our body should be breathing or should be utilizing our mechanics. So many of us are more shallow breathers, or we are breathing using our chests more than was. Yeah. And so when we do start taking in a lot more oxygen, particularly with the superventilative, but this can happen with with other breath patterns as well, we start to feel really strange sensations in our body just purely from the intake of more oxygen. We may be feeling tingling, we may be feeling cramping, we may experience, as you mentioned before, the shaking as our body's teaching us or showing us what it needs. And so that's another thing to keep in mind too. It may feel a little bit strange, but one of the things I like to remind folks is that there isn't any competition in breath work. You don't have to breathe hard and fast and beat yourself in a competition with yourself. You can just slow it down. You can just take it easy. You can just have little sips of it and do just as much as what feels good for you and your body will tell you what is right for you. So you can listen to your body. It's safe to do that.
Yeah. And I'm wondering, as you said, like you brought up the shaking, those emotions are just like energy trapped, right? And energy that needs to move through our bodies. So I'm wondering what does our shaking while we are doing breath work have to do with some of those energies, those emotions coming forth and like being released from our body. I'm wondering how that could be part of it too.
Yeah, I think that relates back to what you mentioned earlier about watching animals in the wild and how they rely on their body's intelligence to shake the trauma out of them or move the emotions out of them, move the physiological experience of stress out of their energy body. Yeah. So yeah, that's really it's really interesting to observe what happens in the world around us and how that can be related to us as a human species as well. And I think that's why there's a lot of other modalities where we're moving our body, like dancing or shaking, that can really help us do that as well. Other embodied practices as well. And we can use them together with breath. We can use them as an adjunct to breath to really access those deeper states of healing.
Yeah. I'm wondering if you would want to show us like an example of what it would be like to do a breathwork session.
Yeah, I would love to do that.
You feel ready for it.
Yes, absolutely. I think so. One thing I wanted to speak about today and show you guys today was around was a foundational breath. So it's diaphragmatic breathing, and this breath it's so simple. We hear about it often. We hear about belly breathing often, but we may sometimes think that we are doing belly breathing and we're not. And the reason I say that is because you can push your belly in and out even without breathing. So it's a good physical indicator from an external viewpoint. So if I were to observe someone else doing it, but it's a really a practice that we can do on our own to modulate and feel in our bodies what's happening. So with this breath, if we can just picture what's happening on our insides, we've got our diaphragm in the lower half of our body, closer to our pelvis, and it's pulling down every time we take in a breath. And so it'd be really helpful to imagine that our body is in 3 different sections for this breath. So we've got from our belly button down, is one section. From our belly button up to our nipples is the second section. And then from our nipples up to the top of our heads is the third section. And if you can just imagine as you're taking in a breath, that the breath is almost like being poured into your body, like a glass of water, and we're pouring it down and it's filling up the bottom chambers first. And so if we can just close down our eyes or soften our gaze for a moment, I'm going to imagine the breath pouring deep down low into our belly button. You can even place a hand into your belly button there, feeling it rise and expand that belly button. And then feeling it actually creep up into that second chamber. And here our ribs are expanding to the sides and expanding. And then into our back as well, if we can feel that part of our body, expanding into the back ribs. And then with our other hand that may be on our chest now, feeling that breath creep up into the chest and then release all of that. So we can place our hands again, our left hand on our heart, our right hand onto our belly button, and imagining that breath pouring in again into the belly button, expanding, imagining that diaphragm pulling down, massaging all the organs in our pelvic area, feeling up our side ribs and our back and up into the chest. And relax, release. And as we're taking this breath, focusing with the breath, taking it in through our nostrils, up into the chest and release. Again, into the belly, feeling that bottom hand rise, into our side ribs, into our back, up to the top of our chest and release. And you can feel now your body really settling into this, really settling into itself. And here, just doing this a few minutes a day, 5 minutes even, 10 minutes even, with some music playing if you like, can really bring you into a calm and centered and focused space and allow us to really tap into our parasympathetic state, into our rest and digest state.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I feel it. I practiced it while you were sharing it with the folks who will be listening, and it just calmed me right down. Feel sleepy now.
Yes. That's a really easy, quick one to do whenever you're doing anything. I often find myself doing that when I'm doing the laundry.
Washing dishes for us moms.
Yeah.
Washing dishes.
Yeah.
I find when I'm feeling really activated by whatever might be activating my children.
Yes.
That's a really simple one to tune to just take care of ourselves so that we can be able to take care of them and do it from a grounded place. Yeah.
Absolutely. I feel like something I've noticed has been really interesting when my little ones are really going through a hard time and they're feeling activated. I realize I'm almost all the time holding my breath because I'm feeling so stressed in that moment. I'm holding my breath, and all it takes is those deep, deep breaths, just a few of them, and you can just feel your whole body relax, and you can really see that co-regulation happening. Your children will start to relax as well.
Right. It's amazing what taking care of ourselves, as like centering our well-being as mothers, can do on our children. It's pretty amazing. It reminds me, breath work reminds me a lot of birth.
Yes.
And how during birth, I'm speaking from my experiences, when you hold your breath, it just makes it that much harder for the baby to descend down the birth canal. Being in that moment, I just delivered my daughter like a year and some change. So it's very fresh in my mind for anyone listening. Yeah, like the breath really just like allows for the baby just to come with a natural process, without fighting. And the breath work really reminds me of those moments. And almost I mean, yes, you are in pain while we're delivering, but there's this sort of surrendering to the breath that almost creates some sense of high, like in that moment. And it's similar to when, again, from my experience, I've done the breath work, like that sense of high, being in my body and being really regulated despite any pain or any external things that might be going on around me. So yeah, like that's speaking from a personal experience on how I see breath work impact all parts of our daily life and big huge moments like birth. Yeah.
Yeah, you just brought me back to my own birth experience, especially with my daughter. And it's absolutely right. Like that moment, I actually remember that moment where I could feel my body just so tense and holding on, trying to hold on to the control, trying to like not wanting to let go, not wanting to surrender, and then just using the breath to remind myself, okay, it's safe to actually let go. And then once I did that, it just made the birth experience a completely different experience.
Yeah. Same for me. And I'm sure other moms might resonate with that too.
Yeah. It's our bodies. It's our bodies trying to keep it. It's our mind trying to keep us safe. And then us really trusting that our body can take over.
That our body is capable of doing its thing. Yep.
Yes.
Thank you for coming on Boom Into Your Soul again. I'm
Thank you so
hoping to
much
have
for having me.
many more chats with you. I love chatting with you. And I'm hoping that the listeners find some gems from this episode.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. And I wanted to offer to everyone as well, if they are new to breathwork and they really liked what they heard today and would like to experience it for themselves, I invite you to come join me and other teachers for the first month free. You can use the code Michelle. It's case sensitive, so capital M, and the rest in lowercase. And this is with the Revelation Breathwork membership.
And then I'll go ahead and add those details to the show notes so that you guys can access that.
Thank you so much, Janeth.
Thank you, Michelle.
I'm so glad that you were able to sit and listen to this conversation. And I wanted to remind you that there is an offering in the description of the podcast where you can access live virtual classes that Michelle teaches, and there's a code for that too. You can follow Michelle at Michelle Diasinos on Instagram, and you can go ahead and let me know over on Instagram what you thought about this episode and how it resonated. I would really love your feedback. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode. There are so many other episodes coming your way with so much goodness and so much value, so don't forget to subscribe.